Welcome to the Startup Grind.
So we always start off every startup grind. Just give us a little background about yourself, where you grew up, and we'll start from there.
Sure. So I want to welcome everyone to ChannelAdvisor. We're excited to host you guys. This is our break room. We just moved into this space in November. It's a 5-story building. We have the 5th floor is our lobby, then the 4th and 3rd floor. The 2nd floor is going to be Microsoft, and then we have half the 1st floor. They're putting in a Starbucks over there, which I'm super excited about. It's not officially a Starbucks, but it's going to have the whole menu, so that'll be good. So come by and see our Starbucks when it opens. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm from South Carolina, a little town called Aiken. It's near, if you play golf, it's near Augusta, Georgia. That's the only thing we're known for, that and horses. Went to the University of South Carolina undergrad. Thought I wanted to do hardware kind of engineering, and then realized I'm not good at hardware, so switched to software. And then graduated in '99, So graduated and decided it was a recession, so it was a good thing to come to NC State and get my master's degree. So I got my master's from NC State, also in software engineering. And that was '91. And then went to work for a startup. How much?
Keep going.
Right, went to work for a startup in Connecticut, realized I like startups but not snow, so moved back down to this area. Started a business called Stingray Software in '95, sold that in '98. Then in '99, started an internet company called Auction Rover, which was an auction search engine. And then sold that in 6 months to a public company. And then while we were part of that company, the idea for ChannelAdvisor came about. Started ChannelAdvisor in 2001. And then still involved with ChannelAdvisor, was CEO all the way from inception to 2013, and then moved, we did an IPO, and then in 2015 became executive chairman, and then just recently started a new company called Spiffy. We do on-demand car washing. So those are kind of the highlights of the career so far.
So we'll get back into that part of it, but that's a good timeline to go off of. Let's just kind of take a step back and tell everybody why you really became an entrepreneur. What are the highlights, and what really drove you to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so my dad was an entrepreneur, and before it was cool, and he was a geek before it was cool. I wasn't really sure I wanted to be an entrepreneur. When I was in college, there was a lot of negatives to being an entrepreneur for my dad. Like I remember family vacations, he'd be on the phone with customers. He had to leave a lot of them early because customers weren't happy. He did software systems for carpet retailers. So his software would calculate how much carpet you need for a room this way, how to optimize it on the rolls, and that kind of stuff. So I wasn't really sure. And then at South Carolina, my uncle works at NCR, and I did internships there, and that made me realize I did not want to work for a big company. And my internship would be, you'd be there from June, July, August, and by July I'd meet the person who was managing me. And then by like mid-August I'd have all the pieces put together to do the project I was supposed to be working on. And you're like, wow, how does this company ever possibly get anything done, and that kind of thing. So when I went to NC State, another big pivot for me was my professor was Dr. Miller. He now runs this whole entrepreneurship initiative there, but before then he was just a professor. And when I was graduating, I had 2 job offers. One was from Motorola, and one was from this guy at NCR that I had met. He'd gone to Connecticut and started a company. So it was kind of like, Motorola in Austin, which would be pretty cool, or work for this guy in Connecticut that I already knew. And I went to Dr. Miller, and he kind of said, "Do you have a mortgage?" And I said, "No, I have nothing. All I have is like a beat-up Honda Accord, 200,000 miles on it." And his argument was, you don't really have anything to lose. You could try this thing, and if it doesn't work out, you can still get that job at Motorola. So that's what I did, and it worked out really well for me.
So was this Stingray software we're talking about?
It was called Bristol Technology up in Connecticut.
So let's talk about Stingray software. So how did that all start for you? What was the premise behind that?
Yeah, the big decision to leave Connecticut was definitely so a couple of external things. It was hard to get a house there, so I was kind of wanting to get a house. And in Connecticut, it's almost like the Bay Area. A starter house is like 1.5 million, and it's 300 square feet. You're just like, wow, I'll never get there. But then, I worked for this business and it was good, but then they started doing things you kind of start to question. Like one of their big things was they sued Microsoft. It was kind of like, all right, we're a $20 million business and we're suing Microsoft. That probably isn't going to go well for us. And it ended up not going well for the company. So kind of all that came together, and just where that business was, it made sense to come here. And I really liked this new developing kind of metaphor called object-oriented programming. Now it's well-worn. And then C++ was kind of the first language, one of the first languages. And then when we were at Bristol, we ported all of Microsoft Foundation classes to Unix, which was pretty neat. And so I got to know the insides of that really well. And then as I got to know it, I saw all these developers. So Microsoft would give you this class library, and it was good enough to do kind of like Notepad, but everyone wanted to do absolute more like Word. So we saw that there was a demand for that. So we came out with class libraries that would help you kind of get those kind of first-in-class type apps. And it was funny because at the time, so we totally bootstrapped it. We each put $5,000 in. And we used our seed money to buy an ad in the one developer journal that was there, and in the way print works, it was going to come out 4 months later. So we had a deadline. We're like, all right, we're going to put out this ad. We better start coding like crazy so we have something to sell when this thing comes out. And in your entrepreneurial dreams, you're like envisioning the phones ringing off the hook and stuff, and we don't have anything to sell. So we worked like day and night on that. The ad came out, and sure enough, it was pretty popular. The phones weren't ringing off the hook, but we sold quite a bit. Just bootstrapped it from there. And after 3 years, we were doing about 12 million in revenue, profitable. It's funny, I went to venture capitalists because we wanted to go international. We were just in the US. So I went to these VCs and I would say, look, we need like $2 million to go, and we want to open an office in London and expand. And they're like, taking our money is the worst thing you could do. And I said, I don't understand that. And then, some of them would say that, and others would say, no one will invest in developer tools. There's no business there. It's kind of funny because now you have GitHub and all these. Twilio just went public, and now it's like super hip to have developer tools. But back then, no one really wanted to fund developer tools.
Go at an entrepreneur. What was the biggest challenge that you faced?
So as an engineering background, I had to kind of get an MBA on the job. So learning all about financials and all that kind of stuff was tricky. It was hard to know who to hire and what sequence. So like one of the last people we hired was a controller. We probably should have hired that person really early. We got to 75 people, and by up to 50 people, I was still doing like the MIS function. So I was CEO, and I was creating your mailbox and making sure this server we had running Outlook wasn't crashing and that kind of stuff. So that was tricky. Making yourself, kind of feel big was interesting. So I remember one time someone called from Goldman Sachs and they wanted 20 licenses, and we're like, okay, what do we do? Because everyone else had we'd done credit cards, and they're like, well, usually people give us a PO and we have to pay with an invoice, and we're like, okay. And then they're like, what's the PO number? And we're like, 8275. They're like, okay, all right, good. And then we invoiced them out of QuickBook. We faked an invoice out of Word, and $20,000 showed up in a check 30 days later. It's like, wow, this is crazy. How does this work? And then back then it was floppy, so they were making floppies like crazy for 2 weeks.
So then what advice would you give a first-time entrepreneur if they have an idea? What's the biggest piece of advice you'd give them moving forward?
Yeah, so I meet a lot of entrepreneurs, and the questions I always get are, what should my idea be? What's a good idea? How do I get funding? A lot of people they kind of have the sequence kind of backwards, where they kind of say, I want to put an idea out there, get funding, and then go build something. I've never done it that way. I go kind of find a customer, understand what they want. It was easy at Stingray because the customer was me. I was a developer, and I knew what I would want. So that was kind of helpful for my first company. And then if you can go and prove it, then going to get capital is kind of the right way to do it. A lot of people feel like our region is backwards because we don't have capital, but I think it's that sequence problem. If you're in the Bay Area, unless you're Mark Zuckerberg or something, no one's going to give you capital for just an idea, even there. So that sequence, is kind of what I always advise people on to think about and make sure they're doing that right.
So Stingray was bought by Rogue Softworks, correct? So how was that process? Going through that for the first time, what was some things that were unexpected?
Yeah. So the way that came up is we couldn't get venture capital, so we still wanted to expand internationally. And what we started to do is there's something like 12,000 Visual C++ developers, and we had 3,000 customers. So kind of doing the math on that, I could see the end of the road there. And we could also see, where were those other 9,000 we didn't have, and we felt like they were international. So we thought like maybe we could get to 5,000 in the U.S., but there was kind of like definitely a ceiling that we hit, and we were growing 100%. So we're kind of like, we did the math on that. We're like, holy cow, we're going to run out of customers here. So the VC was to get international expansion. And ultimately, we kind of said, well, if they're not going to do that, is there a partner we could have that already has an international sales force? And we found Rogue Wave Software. They were public, so you could kind of go and figure out that like 60% of their revenues were international. So we went and pitched them, and they were mostly Unix developer tools, and we were Windows. And it was interesting. So we had like a low-level meeting, and where the pitch was, hey, we want to do a deal. You guys become our international sales arm, and we'll give you 30% or whatever. And then they were like, well, how much do you think you could sell? And we said, well, we think in 3 years we could do 12 million, because that's kind of what we did in the U.S. And then they came back and they're like, we've thought about it, we're interested. And then we like started meeting more and more senior people. Then ultimately, we met the CEO, and he's like, well, why don't we just buy you? And we're like, okay. It's not, it was a little bit of a shock. We didn't know what to do, so we just kind of listened. They put out what we thought was a bit of a lowball offer, but how do you value these things? And then we went and found, I had a bunch of mentors. So Richard Holcomb was a big mentor. He's kind of a generation ahead of me in his startup career. He had sold 2 businesses, and so met with him, and he's really funny in country. He's like, they're trying to steal this company from you, don't you do it? But then he kind of gave us like a good idea of how to come back and prove that. And ultimately, having a good mentor was really important through that process.
I mean, we talk about mentors. Me, mentors are a huge thing. I think that a lot of startups should find mentors. What is the best way to go out and find a mentor?
Yeah, so one of the beautiful things about North Carolina is you will find, there are a lot of people that are open to being mentoring and giving back. So a lot of it is finding someone that has a skill set that, find someone that you want to be is kind of what I did. So here was a guy that, he had sold 2 or 3 companies. He was just starting Hot Software. He had sold Q plus E for like $100 million. And so it was in software. He was actually a South Carolina undergrad. He had ties to NC State as well. So it was like a perfect kind of fit for me. Someone I could talk to and understand and that kind of thing. So going to stuff like this, what's nice about the Triangle is there's just a ton of folks that can be mentors that are that are whatever and then so there's that generation, there's my generation, there's like 2 or 3 generations even younger than that. So like the Bronto guys, the Automated Insight guys, Robbie's going to be speaking. There's Judd Bowman and all these folks in the Triangle now that are serial entrepreneurs that they seem to give back a lot to the community.
So now you sold Stingray. Now what was your next move?
I'm a Star Wars fan. So my next move was to buy the biggest Star Wars stuff I could find. So that's where a lot of this stuff came into my life at that phase. Enjoyed having a little capital finally. But then the downside of selling your business is it's kind of like your child, and then you're just like selling them to some other family kind of a thing. But you get to stay around and watch for a while, watch them misparent your child. So we sold it to the company, and we went through, before we sold it, we said, we want to be this independent thing, and that was great. And then immediately, like 30 days after the transaction closed, the marketing department reported this company they were split. They had development in Corvallis, Oregon, and then corporate was in Boulder, Colorado. So like the development team reported to Corvallis, and then like every 3rd person in our company now reported to someone in another place. So there was like totally discombobulated and pulled apart. So it was kind of a painful year to do that, but that's kind of the tricky part is they want you to stay around to help with integration, but then like they really don't want you involved. So it's like this really weird thing to get your head around. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, like why folks do that. So that was the good thing about it though was at this point, so Mark Andreessen had come up with Mosaic, which was the browser, and I had a lot of free time to kind of play around with that. So that was, that's what got me excited about the internet and thinking through, wow, this could change everything. What if commerce comes here? Amazon launched, eBay launched. So all those things were pretty monumental and seemed like they were going to be the future.
So that was that. So your next company was Auction Rover? Is that what's?
Yeah.
So how did you get into that auction world? Was it based on Amazon? Was it based on eBay? How did that all work?
Yeah, at that point, it's kind of funny. eBay was not the first auction site. There were several others. One was Ubid and On Sale, and There's even a company here locally called OpenSite. They had software so that anyone could open auction sites. It's like Sharper Image. A lot of retailers were opening their own auction sites. The way we got into it was we were excited about e-commerce, and we wanted to kind of do something in that area. And the first idea we had was, what if there's all these sites that sell stuff online? You're going to want to be able to find good prices. So that's now called a comparison shopping engine. So we wanted to build a comparison shopping engine. We didn't really call it that. It was like a price searcher or something like that. We started working on it and doing a prototype. And then literally 30 days later, 5 companies in the Bay Area announced $10 million in funding, 20, 30. And we're like, oh, crap, this is kind of done for now. But at the same time, I had started buying Star Wars stuff and found that some of the best Star Wars stuff I would find would be on these very abstract auction sites. Like there was one that actually did movie props, but it was very archaic. The search engine kind of stank compared to eBay and all that kind of thing. So I was like, wouldn't it be cool if there was one that did all the auction sites? So that was it was kind of a derivative of comparison shopping. And what was interesting about it was it's harder than comparison shopping because on an auction site, everything is generally 7 days old or something like that. So from a computer science standpoint, your data set changes every 7 days. So that was really tough, and we thought that would be a good competitive barrier to entry.
Now you're going to your second startup.
Yeah.
What lessons you learned from your first to your second startup?
Yeah, so this time we said, let's go get capital because this is going to be, it was very bubbly. We kind of felt like having rounded out ourselves the first time, it was kind of crazy. So we started raising capital, and it was like insanely easy. It was like, so I found the secret to raising capital is don't have revenue. So, and whatever you do, don't be profitable. So I would go to these VCs and like literally this one guy like literally wrote me a check. Like the stories you hear during that time were crazy. He like wrote me $1 million check, and I was like, wow, this is so easy. If only I knew. So we raised $3 to $4 million bucks. We raised money from Draper Fisher Jervison. They had an affiliate in DC called Draper Atlantic. That was really good because that tied us in. And I was, there was a company called GoTo.com. They'd been in this thing called paid search. And it was controversial at the time because everyone's like, it's going to ruin the internet having advertising on there. It's kind of funny. Like today, you can't really find the search results. You're kind of like, I know they're in there somewhere. I just really liked this model they had called pay-per-click. I thought it was pretty interesting. It was out of Idea Lab in Pasadena. And so we thought, we knew we wanted to do an auction search. We had no idea how we'd make money. And we kind of said, we're just going to do PPC, kind of thing. Ultimately, we built the product in 6 months. And this was like a crazy time, like literally living all together in a space kind of maybe a quarter of the size of this room. We launched it, and then we launched the engine. It actually started generating a little bit of revenue, and then GoTo came to us and said, this is really interesting, we'd like to buy it. And at this point, the bubble was just starting to burst. Companies like The Globe had like a $5 billion valuation or something, and they had no revenue. We're just like, yeah, this is not sustainable. So we sold the company at that point and became part of GoTo. Then they changed their name to Overture and got acquired by Yahoo. But they were, this part of the story, they were GoTo/Overture.
So you sold the first company, and you relied on mentors to kind of help you navigate that process. What was it like for the second acquisition?
The second acquisition was pretty easy because they just threw out a ridiculously large number, and we said yes. So it was kind of like, okay, but you guys are sure? You guys know we have no revenue, we're like, right? And they're like, yes. It's even better. We're like, okay. So it's literally a lottery ticket, kind of very lucky kind of thing. What's funny is we had a competitor that was a little bit ahead of us. So there's a buyer side to Auction Rover and a seller side. We focused on the buyer side. We had a competitor that focused on the seller side, and they were probably 6 months ahead of us. And GoTo went to them first, and they said no, they wanted double what GoTo wanted, which is crazy. And then we said sure, and then that company that said no ultimately ended up with 0. So
how many employees did you have at this time?
We probably had maybe like 80 folks, mostly engineering. Just kind of the product piece of that was very, very hard. And there was no cloud computing, so we're buying servers and trying to figure out, how do you put data across all these, how do you jam all this into SQL Server, and SQL Server was like, had smoke coming out of it. So then we had to like shard SQL Server, which no one had ever done before. So we had to like we had to like invent a ton of stuff that, today you would just put Hadoop in the cloud and boom, it would be golden. But, we had to figure all that out.
And what did you do in between the time between doing auction and channel advisor? What was that? Was there any downtime? What did you do kind of during that part of that?
Yeah. So what's interesting about that is they promised to leave us alone, and they did. So we were kind of like, rogue little pirate ship kind of auction rovers still off on our own. And they would just fund us. And so we were trying to figure out how to make money at this point. But it took all the pressure off because we weren't writing our own checks. So we'd done the buyer piece, so we started working on the seller piece and put it out there, and it was really popular. We got like 10,000 customers signing up. We gave it away free for the first 6 months, and then 6 months later we started charging, and we lost like maybe 30% of the folks, but we kept them, and it was like $20 a month kind of thing. So what I realized pretty quickly was it would never make money because these folks most of them called us all the time. They'd want to call and just like chat, and they're kind of like literally just chat about nothing. Call and say, my daughter's at college, I'm really worried. You're like, ma'am, did you have a question about our software? Oh, no, I just wanted to talk to somebody. I was like, get off the phone. That just cost us like $1,000. Put down the phone. And then the epiphany that became Channel Advisor is we had all these people using the software, and at this point, eBay was like the biggest auction site. But eBay was like 99% Beanie Babies. And these Beanie Babies were going for like, as part of the bubble, they were going like $600-700 and all this kind of stuff. So we had a lot of customers using it to sell Beanie Babies. And our biggest customer was this lady that did handmade stuff. She's called Granny Goose out of Iowa. And she would sell like $5,000 a month. So I was looking at some reports of what was going on, looking to see what Granny Goose did. And it said Sun Microsystems, $2 million. And I was like, what? This is crazy. And went and looked, and sure enough, Sun Microsystems, when the dot-com bubble burst, they were swimming in hardware. And they were trying to figure out what to do with it. And some employee had the idea to kind of just try putting it on eBay to see what happened. And sure enough, the same people that collected, there were some small percentage of people that collected Beanie Babies that were also IT folks, and they're like, hey, I have 50% off server. I'll buy an elephant Beanie Baby and a server. Boom, everyone's happy. And I'm not a genius, but I was kind of like, all right, they sold $2 million of servers and they paid us $20. There's probably some upside there. We could probably charge a little bit. So we kind of flew out to see them, and we're like, what's going on? They're like, oh, we love eBay. What you guys have done is amazing, but we have these 10 feature requests. And what they were wanting was, the way the software was designed is our customers, these power sellers, were very they're like craftsmen, right? So they would go acquire this thing, and they would like take a picture of it. So our software kind of had that logical step. Step 1, what is it you're selling? Step 2, take a picture. Step 3, what do you want to price it for? Step 5, that kind of thing. So Sun said, well, we know what we have, and we have all the digital assets. We want to take 1,000 servers and just like slam them onto eBay as fast as possible. So we kind of redid the software. We kind of Henry Fordized it, made it a pipeline kind of approach versus a onesie-twosie thing. And Sun loved that, and we called it our Enterprise Edition, and they paid us a bunch more. And then suddenly like Motorola came and IBM, and we're still part of Overture. And we said, we're kind of onto something. This is really weird. eBay was for people to people, but now we've kind of turned it into business to people. And what if other things on the internet kind of go that way? What does that look like? At the same time, these two dudes out of Stanford started a company with a silly name, and they did a search engine, and the Overture guys were like, these guys are clueless. We're going to destroy them. Our system's better. And we're going to go consolidate we're going to go consolidate all the awesome search engines like Dogpile and Alta Vista. And we're going to these guys will never be able to defeat us because we'll have so much armor. But we're going to shut you guys down. And we said, okay, but what if we want to buy this kind of like idea from you? And initially they were like, no, you can't do that. But ultimately they kind of said, okay, sure. And we said, look, we'll do that, and instead of you laying off people, they can move to this new company, and you don't have to pay severance. And finally, they're like, that's actually a pretty good deal for us. So we, they essentially kind of gave us some of the IP and the people. It was kind of a Brer Rabbit kind of thing. And then they said, the only requirement is eBay has to invest. We're like, geez, who comes up with this stuff? So then we went to eBay, and they said, sure, we'll invest. And we're like, wow, this is crazy. So in 2001, we kind of spun out with the intellectual property we developed, an eBay investment, and we kind of started funding it ourselves for a while. And then ultimately, that company was Google. Those two stand for crazy people. And they did have a better software, and they crushed Overture like a bug. It was painful to watch.
So how much money did you raise for Channel Advisor? When did you decide, like, hey, we got to raise some money to kind of take advantage of the fire here?
Yeah. So Channel Advisor, we self-funded it until 2003. And then what happened is these enterprises started using it, and then the power sellers, there used to be this huge gap between like Sun and Granny Goose, and the power sellers kind of grew up over that kind of 2-year time frame. So then power sellers started coming in and saying, can I use that software Motorola's using because I have 8,000 shoes I want to sell, I have 1 million DVDs I want to sell, this kind of stuff. And so we actually started to get revenue and start percolating around 2003. We probably did $3 or $5 million kind of that year. And then a VC calls, and he's out of Boston, and he's the number, according to him, and it's probably true, he's the world's largest Roberto Clemente collector. And he's like, everywhere I look on eBay, one of the things we did was, being like viral guerrilla marketers, is every listing on eBay said powered by Channel Advisor. He said, I can't look at eBay for my cards without seeing powered by, who are you and what are you doing? So we explained it to him, and he said, this is genius, I want to invest. So we ended up kind of raising capital that way. That was called Kodiak Ventures out of Boston. So we did, I think, like a $5 million Series A, and then we used that to get into some new products. So I have a pretty simple entrepreneur's playbook. Number one is get customers, and then number two is listen to them and do what they say. So we would go to customers like. We started working with large retailers, and we'd like go to Best Buy and say, hey, we have this cool thing you can sell on eBay. Motorola is doing like millions of dollars, and you guys, we think Best Buy would ton it on here. And they'd say, great, but our IT guys are busy doing these data feeds for comparison shopping engines. And we do a fair amount about comparison shopping engines, and we're like, that's actually easier than like the stuff we do. So we came out, we heard that enough times, so we said, we took the funding, we came out with a second product. So we had auctions, which later became marketplaces. Then we did comparison shopping. Then folks kind of asked, they said, look, paid search has gotten big enough. We want to take our product catalog and have it automatically generate keywords. We said, we know a lot about all those things. So then we did a search offering. So as we did this, we were growing and growing and growing, kind of, probably over about 100% kind of year after year, pretty steadily from kind of that 03 to 08 timeframe. Now it's a very transactional thing that we do at Channel Advisor. So the way Channel Advisor works is we take a retailer or brand's products virtually into our servers, we reformat them, and we send them across the internet to what we call e-commerce channels. So, and then transactions come back. So it's very transactional, so we have to store all this stuff. You can't lose data because orders get lost, and all kinds of bad things happen when people don't get their holiday presents and stuff. So a lot of the funding, ultimately we ended up raising $90 million from 01 to 2013, not counting the IPO, and a lot of that went to servers. So we have a large chunk of a data center here, one in Atlanta and one internationally, and we have hundreds of servers that we own and operate. So if we were to do it today, we obviously wouldn't do that. But that's kind of what you had to do. So we have, so there's chunks of it that are on the cloud and that kind of thing. Some of the cloud stuff, the way we're architected, doesn't 100% translate to the cloud, but most of it does.
So you had eBay was the first one to invest in you. Was there ever a chance for them to acquire you? Did they ever talk about that, or?
Yeah. So what's interesting about that is VCs always, that's one of their number one questions. And I've learned that that's another thing I think a lot of entrepreneurs do wrong is they think about, when they test their idea, they test it for what's my exit strategy. And I've never really worried about exit strategy. I kind of focus on if you can get the customer growth and those things, then the exit strategy works itself out. So in a weird way, Channel Advisor is almost unacquirable. So here's why. So we're kind of like a starfish, right? So one leg of the starfish is eBay, another's Amazon, another's Google, another's Facebook, and all these other companies, Pinterest and whatnot. And if eBay bought us, Amazon wouldn't like that. They would probably shut down that piece of it, or they would not be a great partner anymore. So in a weird way, it's kind of built to be Switzerland. It's very hard for one of those partners to acquire us. So I think eBay has kind of realized that, and a lot of these companies, they have this kind of not invented here thing. So there's been several times when eBay's kind of said, oh, we'll just go build this kind of thing ourselves, and then they fail, and they kind of come back to us and partner. And so we've had a lot of that kind of ebb and flow over the years, but we really haven't had a lot of acquisition offers around that.
So now, what was the decision? So you obviously couldn't be acquired based on that. So what was the decision to then go public? How did that process work?
Yeah, so it was 2012, and the public markets were thawing, and we were a SaaS business at kind of an $80 million runway with we could see a path to 100, 120 million pretty easily, and we started looking around, and companies were going public at kind of that range and doing really well, and we decided, one company kind of in our space was called Marin Software, and they went public and got a really good valuation. And then you also, we had really great investors, but the Kodiak folks, John left the firm, and then we had a new partner, and that fund was getting on, so let's see, it was 10 years that they had been invested in. And when you take VC, part of the deal is they have kind of a life cycle they're aiming for, and we were kind of butting up against that with those guys. Our Series B guys were kind of getting there too. So there was just, it seemed like the timing was kind of right to try it out. So the window, we kind of determined the window was open. We did a bake-off to pick our bankers and just ran really hard at it. And it ended up, there was this window of like literally probably 120 days that we got out, and then the window closed right after us for quite a while. So it was a good thing to get out and to get it good.
So what's the greatest benefit about going public?
The greatest benefit about going public is you raise capital, and it makes it easier for you to raise capital. So we did like an $80 million IPO, so that's fresh capital into the company. And then we did a secondary where we raised another 20 or 30. And then employees got liquidity, so that's really good. All these people that had options for so long, they were now worth something. So that was really exciting for all those folks. They got rewarded for all their hard work. And then as a public company, it gives you this currency if you want to go do acquisitions, hiring people. You have a kind of another currency now that it's actually worth something. A lot of times here in the Bay Area, everyone gets options, and people treat them very seriously. Here in North Carolina, you have to educate employees a lot that, it's tricky because you want to get them excited about it, but you don't want to get them so excited that they think they're all going to be trillionaires either. So there's this really kind of tricky balance of, how do you do that and make people understand that equity is a good thing. So when you're public, it's kind of like a lot easier. It's like, we're going to give you these restricted stock units. If you go look, the price of this stock is whatever it is today, and then as it goes up, the value of this goes up. So it's a lot easier when you're public to explain equity.
Did you acquire companies at Channel Advisor? Or?
We did, yeah. So when we were private, the Series C investor we had was called NEA, and there's a lot of these venture capital firms that have gotten very, very big. So the way it works is kind of very feast or famine in the venture capital world. The Andreessen Horowitz, the Kleiner Perkins, NEA, there's a list of kind of 10 firms, and they're just soaking up all the capital. But in doing so, they're getting really big. So NEA is probably like $6 or $8 billion. Andreessen Horowitz is 10. Battery is like 8 or 9. Those kinds of things. And it's really weird to think about it from the entrepreneur standpoint, but the way their model works is they have so many partners. Partners can only sit on 5 to 8 boards. So you do the math of that, you take this big $1 billion number, you divide it by like 10 partners and the number of companies, and they have to put like $30 million to work in every company. So to do Channel Advisor, they had, it was like this huge negotiation. They wanted to put $40 million to work. We only needed 20, and it was kind of like, they're like, okay. So then then that pushes you to go harder and faster. So we did a couple acquisitions with that capital and got a little bit more capital. Several of them worked, some of them didn't work great. Acquisitions are really hard for all the same reasons on the selling side as on the buying side.
Did you take any lessons from being bought to then buying companies?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I would do is say to the entrepreneur, look, it's important to decide, if you want to come into the company and help us run it and be kind of an independent thing, great. But if you don't, that's fine too. You can go ahead and leave. Let's have a plan and know that you're going to stay around 90 days and not a year, and not make this painful for everybody, kind of a thing.
So is it more acquired for growth? Is that what it's...
Sometimes we require to get into new product areas. So part of our search solution was an acquisition. Sometimes you're hedging your bets. So there's a German company that kind of was doing really well, and we were worried. Well, we weren't in Germany, so it was a way to get there. But we were worried that they would come at us, and they had some features and functionality that were kind of ahead of us. So it was kind of offensive and defensive. Since we've been public, we acquired one company that got us into a whole new segment. So we tend to deal with retailers, and there's more and more branded manufacturers that want to sell direct. And the company we acquired, it's November of 14, was called eTail out of the UK, and they had developed a system for helping brands go direct. So it's kind of a more getting us into an adjacency kind of an area.
So now, what is the greatest lesson that you had by starting and then eventually going public with Channel Advisor?
Greatest lesson. So public markets are very fickle. So you read all this stuff and it's very true. So on the roadshow is great. You meet with Fidelity and Janus, and they're very long-term kind of oriented shareholders, which is awesome. They tend to be mutual funds. And you meet with hedge funds, but they don't really do much with IPOs. But then, like a lot of the mutual funds, they take your IPO and then they sell it. It went up pretty aggressively, and they're like, boom, it hit our target, and they sell it. And then suddenly your shareholder base, you have no control over it. And now it's these hedge funds, and you're meeting like one of your largest shareholders, and like, yeah, what's your company do? And you're like, whoa, this is kind of crazy. And then you explain it, and they're just like, yeah. You can tell they're not really processing it. They're like, how's the quarter going? And they're so short-term focused that it's really tricky to have them as shareholders and have those discussions. As an entrepreneur that likes to build things over kind of a long arc, then suddenly you're meeting a long shareholder, and you partner with VCs, and you have this long relationship, and now you're meeting these shareholders that are just kind of like, and some are not shareholders, they're just thinking of investing, and they're kind of like, yeah, I don't really care what you do, like, how's the quarter going, and how do you grow faster? So it's kind of disheartening that the public markets are so disconnected from actually building companies, and very short-term, what are you doing this quarter? We knew that going in, so we've done a lot of things in the company culture to kind of inoculate against that mindset, and I think we do that really well. But some of the challenges are our customers sell stuff to consumers. Consumer behaviors change, recessions happen, things like that, and it makes it really hard to predict what's going to happen. So, especially on a 90-day window kind of a time frame.
So, what do you see for the future of e-commerce?
So the future of e-commerce is pretty exciting. So consumer behavior is changing faster than it ever has before, and that's just totally uprooting all these industries, right? And that creates opportunities for entrepreneurs. So look at I've probably pitched JCPenney 50 times, and they're kind of in this turtle mode where they won't, they don't do much in e-commerce. They think it's a fad. It's like, how do we use it to bring people to our store? And you're just like, really, this is crazy. It's just crazy talk. Those companies that things are changing so fast. Like a 100-year-old company like that doesn't adapt will be out of business. Look at Borders, look at Linens and Things, look at Circuit City. Those are companies that they turtled, and they're like, yeah, people will come back to our stores. They're super awesome, and they'll buy DVDs. They're streaming as a fad, and you're just like, okay. And it's funny because even today, very large retailers will have those discussions, and they just don't get it. Yeah. So mobile is huge, and what's going on there. I get really excited about augmented reality and virtual reality. I think those are going to be huge. I think 3D printing is pretty interesting for retail. I think we're not far away from you being able to 3D print shoes. Probably not in your house, but at a local 3D print product center. What does that do to Nike and Under Armour and those guys? And then drones are cool just because they're awesome. We have drone fans.
So do you think one day, if I'm going to buy, let's say, a pair of shoes, I'm going to buy it on Amazon, let's say, and then it gets printed at my house, and the shoe's going to repair?
You'll scan your foot with AR. You'll see the shoe. You'll submit it. It'll get printed a mile from here, and a drone will bring it to you. That's how all those things come together. Yeah. And you can look at it in 360 with your AR. You can be inside the shoe.
So now let's fast forward and talk about your current venture. How did you go from an e-commerce platform to now an on-demand platform like Spiffy?
Yep. Yeah, so kind of backed into it. In 2003, I decided to invest, kind of diversify into a car wash. So I bought a car wash and had a partner that kind of operated it. It's Carolina Auto Spots back in Maynard Road, but it's in Cary and Maynard Road. And then in 2005, we built another one in Apex. So I always had these car washes. In anyone that watches Breaking Bad, they always kind of ask if I use it to launder cash. That's not what it's for. I don't do crystal meth production or anything like that. Just a software guy. And so had those businesses, and then in 2012, right when Uber launched, one of our ChannelVisor customers, he shut down his business and he went to work for this business called Uber in New York. I was like, what the heck's an Uber? And he's like, oh, you got to try it. So I went to New York and tried Uber for the first time and was blown away by it. I was like, this is awesome. I press a button on my phone and a car comes. You know, how cool is that? You do things in cyberspace and it happens in the real world. And we started thinking about doing it in the car wash kind of 2013. And then what happened is a Bay Area company called Cherry launched, and it had like $10 million from Andreessen Horowitz, and we're like, okay, this is never going to be the Uber for car washing. But having done car washing, we kind of thought they were doing some things wrong. They had a great app. Like, the app was awesome. You could tell they were awesome app developers and had all these cool animations and stuff. But their price point was $20 or $30, and they did that shared economy thing. So the same people that were Uber drivers would come and they would have like a bucket and a sponge in their back of their car. And they'd be like, where's the hose? And they would like just literally come and use your stuff and wash your car. And we're kind of like, that's not what people want. We knew we had a couple of detail vans that we ran. We kind of knew that wasn't what people wanted. So we watched that really closely. And sure enough, after about 9 months, they burned through all that capital and closed down. So I actually view that as a good thing as a North Carolina entrepreneur. Whenever you have an idea that a Bay company is trying to do and they fail, then what that does is it actually, you know, Bay Area investors we don't have any here, do we? Okay. I don't think we do. Except for Google Ventures. Bay Area investors, they're very lemmings, right? So the general way it works is if something fails there and it's a good team and a good investor, then it's common wisdom, it can't be done. You know, this is a bad category. So we knew that would clear the decks for a while, and it still, you know, to this day, no one has funded one out of there because of this. So we decided in 2014 just to do a test, and we put an app out. We came up with a brand, Spiffy. We put our 2 vans in there. We got 2 more vans, rebranded them, and we just pushed it out there. And the response was overwhelming. We didn't really market it at all. People just kind of found it. You'd be surprised how many people just search for on-demand car wash. And so just SEO, people found us. The big surprise for us was at the tunnel car washes, and it's obvious in hindsight, but we're blinded by the tunnel car washes. And the tunnel car washes, it's weekends and evenings. So it's guys like you and I, your wife's like, I've been with kids all week, get out of the house. And you know, so it's middle-aged dudes with their kids trying to do something that knocks off a honeydew kind of item. So we thought that would be the model for on-demand. So we were kind of like all staffed up for weekends and evenings, and orders started coming through, and it was like Wednesday, Thursday, Tuesday, all during the day. And we're like, oh, this is weird. We didn't really have people staffed for this time frame. And so it turns out, and obviously, you're most idle when you're at work. So your car kind of sits here at ChannelVisor for 8 hours, right? So we would come to places like Perimeter Park and start washing, and the property managers security guys would literally come up and say, you've got to leave now. We do not allow car washing. So we're like, oh crap, this is not good. Everyone wants their car washed at work, and then it's not allowed to be done. That's not a good business model. But my partner, Carl, he kind of is a really good sales guy, so he went and kind of worked his way up and met the property manager, met a VP at like Highwoods. And he said, why do you not allow car washing? The guy said, it's simple, 4 reasons. Number one, he's talking about detailers. He's like, your guys are all criminals. Your vans look like they abduct children, and we have a Class A office space. We can't have that. You have no insurance, and most importantly, we have all these rules about runoff and where it goes and the EPA guidelines. You guys leave like a chemical factory right in the parking lot that just, we're worried we're going to pay $200,000 fine one day because all this stuff comes up out of the groundwater. So we said, okay, we can work on that. So number one, all our folks are, we decided early on to go ahead and W-2 all the employees. They're full-time employees versus the 1099 economy thing. And 1099 is tricky. You can't train people that are 1099 and stuff like that. We just didn't feel that it would be a good customer experience to have a guy with an orbital waxer on your car, and all you can do is give him a checklist that says, you know, don't leave the waxer there for more than 10 seconds. It's like, what's that say? You know, it makes a big hole in your car. So we train all our guys, they're background checked, they wear uniforms, we have a cute penguin that helps with the whole, you know, disarming people about car washing. The app helps a lot because you pay through the app, there's not all this kind of, you know, cash exchanging hands. We got a ton of insurance. And then the biggest innovation was we started working on the chemical problem. and number one, we use less water. So at your home, you use like 100 gallons because the pipe is terrible. And then at our car wash, we use 20, and then Spiffy, we use 5. So we get the water way down. And then we found as green chemicals as we can find. And then the big discovery was we found these mats, and we wash every car on a mat. So all the water hits the mat, and then we pull it all back, and we take it in the van, and we run it through our reclamation system. So then we went to the property managers and said, we've solved all the problems. And they were like, holy cow, you really have. And this is great because now we can offer to our tenants a zero cost amenity. And it was good for us because in our model, we had anticipated, all right, we're gonna have to travel kind of 30 minutes on average, so we're gonna bake that into the cost of the car wash. So what we do as part of this amenity is, if we're gonna go to SideQuest across the street, we'll offer those folks $10 or $20 off our different washes. And it's still good margin for us because we're just putting the truck there from 9 to 5 and not traveling. So once we did that, then it really took off. And so now the model is we go to property managers, they introduce us to tenants, and then they introduce us to their customers. And it's a very, very efficient way. And then it also has recurring revenue attributes. So we know that when we go to Citrix on a Sunday day, it's going to be $500 to $800 like clockwork. So that enables you to build a business when you have recurring revenue. You don't kind of have to guess where your next meal is coming from.
So what do you see the long-term play with Spiffy? Is it sticking car washes? Is it moving to other verticals?
Yeah, so a lot of people say, all right, you did e-commerce, now you're washing cars. Where I don't get it. To kind of like, it actually makes sense to me, oddly enough. And here's how it makes sense. So if you think about GDP, right? Remember your macroeconomics. What is GDP? It's the gross domestic product. There's 2 chunks of GDP. There's goods and services. Goods are 20% and services are 80%. So services are 4 times bigger than goods. And if you look at e-commerce is the digitalization of goods. It's kind of goods either becoming digital themselves, like books, music, and movies, or it's the digital delivery of those goods, like what Amazon does. So I think what we study a lot at Channel Advisor is the change in consumer behaviors. Consumers are on their phone, they're catching Pokemon, they're checking in, they're Instaing, they're Snapchatting, whatever you're doing, and that they love the convenience of being able to do things from their phone. And I think that Uber is training everyone that if there's a service you want done, that's the best model. And so and we're seeing that. The other thing that's interesting about Spiffy is at the car wash, I talked about the demographics. Our number one demographic at Spiffy is female millennials. And we think they're not actually getting their car wash. It's like incrementally new people that are not going to the car wash. And when you talk to them, they just love the convenience of it. They're like, I don't have to worry about tipping and cash. My car looks awesome. I feel great. It's so easy and convenient. And then the next one is Gen X females too. So there's this whole kind of different demographic we've tapped into, which is awesome. So we're just trying to figure out. So we started in Raleigh-Durham. A year ago we expanded to Charlotte. We're getting pulled into Atlanta, so we're launching in Atlanta August 1st. So we're just trying to figure out how do we roll out more cities. What does that look like? How do we get kind of 15 or 20 cities? And then we get a lot of requests. So one of the popular things in the Bay Area is fueling. A lot of people that are my generation or older laugh at this because they're like, this is ridiculous. These millennials can't take time to go to the convenience store. But there's a lot of demand for on-demand fueling. So that's when we're kind of thinking about, we get a lot of requests for oil change and auto repair. We're not going to do everything, but those are some interesting areas that we're thinking about what we could do more on.
So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to all you guys to, so if you want to answer a question or ask a question, just raise your hand and.
Hey, Scott.
Hey.
As I listen to your list of venture capitalists, I noticed these are all people who have come to CED, spoken at Tech Venture like Jurvetson and so forth. Can you talk about how CED has helped you from idea to exit on a few of these, including Mr. Jones over here?
Sure, yeah. So I'm a big fan of CED. I've been involved in it since, probably 96, I would say. I was a consumer of all their stuff back in the day, and now I try to give back to it as much as possible. I'll do a Tech Venture I'm co-chairing Tech Venture this year, and we're going to do an entrepreneurial kind of workshop, so I'd love for you guys to come to that. There'll be more information on that soon. CED, so I'm pretty sure we met ATV through CED, and definitely NEA was kind of connected in there.
Right.
So it's a great kind of a area to be. The one thing that's a little deceptive is these Bay Area kind of VCs love to come and talk at CED, but they never invest here. Not gonna, they sometimes invest here, but it's pretty rare. And it took me a long time to figure out why that was, and like why are they coming if they're not investing here? And the reason they come here, the big secret is some of the best limited partners are in North Carolina. So they're here to see Janet Cowell that runs the Treasury. They're here to see the Duke Foundation, the UNC Foundation, all this stuff. So that's kind of, it took me until I went to my first LP meeting. So when you raise capital from a venture capitalist, they'll invite you to their LP meeting because they'll showcase some companies. So I go to this NEA LP meeting. I'm like, what's this going to be like? And number one, my VC is acting weird. Like he's usually tough on me, and he's like holding me accountable. He's like, Scott, how you doing? What's up, buddy? I'm like, what's going on? Who is this guy? He's like, I really want to introduce you to some people. And it's like every third person you meet's a Rockefeller. There's, this guy runs the Canadian Pension Fund. This guy runs this thing, and that's their customers. That's where they're getting their capital from. And kind of like the light bulb went off for me. I'm like, wait, these guys have to go pitch too? This is hilarious. Yeah. So that was kind of, it took me, until then I didn't really kind of realize how all that worked. So that's why we get a lot of those people here, is they're actually kind of pitching the money that's in North Carolina, and they don't really invest here that much.
Some of them are Duke guys, come for the basketball game.
A lot of the Duke guys, yes, they love to tie a basketball game in there. Yeah. Yeah. Good.
So are your customers concerned that they are in bed with a single source? And also, why did you pitch JCPenney 30 times?
Yeah. So our customers, so when you say single source, like a single point of failure? Or?
Yes.
Yeah. So eBay, Amazon, and all these guys, they have free tools. So eBay will give you a free tool for selling on eBay. Amazon will give you a free tool for selling there. Jet will give you a free tool. So in many cases, if something happened to Channel Advisor, that would be their plan B. That's usually where they come from when they move to Channel Advisor. Now the problem with those tools is twofold. Number one, Amazon's tool won't help you sell on eBay or Jet or Walmart. The same, so they're all very single source. And then number two, their problem is Amazon has 2 million sellers, eBay has 8 million sellers. So they have a lowest common denominator problem, right? They can't put much advanced functionality in there because they don't want to give the granny gooses of the world an automatic repricer, because it's like giving them a loaded gun and they just like shoot themselves in the foot repeatedly. Or a Lamborghini and they've never driven. There's a lot of good analogies there. We're North Carolina, so we'll talk about guns. So what's unique about our software is we kind of focus on the cream of the power sellers. So there's 2 million sellers on Amazon. Maybe on Amazon 50,000 would make sense to use our software. So by doing that, we don't have a lowest common denominator problem. So that's the attractiveness of, okay, I'm going to move my business over to this vendor. I'm going to pay them versus free, multi-channel, and way advanced functionality that helps them grow their business. And then the second part of your question was?
Why did you pitch?
Why did I go to JCPenney? So part of being successful at entrepreneurship is some may call it stupidity, others would call it grit. So I don't know. The best sales calls are those that you've been there for 30 times, because you kind of keep hitting your head against that wall and trying to figure it out over and over again. I don't know. A glutton for punishment that one. Learn something every time. So.
So you talked about kind of the process of, kind of starting up a company as far as getting customers first, as opposed to taking in all this money before you actually kind of proved it out. What kind of advice do you have as far as that goes? Because I do kind of agree that that's kind of a lost art, but it's also kind of challenging to, sell something from the ground up before you kind of got resources. So.
Yeah. So that's another nice thing about software, right? You can kind of sell an idea and then go build the software pretty quickly. Especially today, like the cost to build software has come way down. The tools available have come way down, and that kind of thing. So the early ideas can very well be, you don't have to always have the software to pitch a customer. You go to a customer and say, hey, Mr. Potential Customer, I think you have this pain. What if I built software that did this, and get in a kind of a brainstorming session with them, and then go build a prototype of that, and go down, and then do that. A lot of VCs are negative on this idea, but I've seen it work really well. Another thing to do is just start consulting. There's a company here called Prometheus Group, and Eric Wong is the entrepreneur. He's an NC State guy, so I know him really well. And they just he was an industrial engineer. I can't remember if he was industrial, mechanical, or chemical. I'm pretty sure he was industrial. And he just started doing consulting, and like on his third consulting gig, it was some firm that had installed SAP, and SAP has this maintenance module, and it was like a plant, and this maintenance module kind of says, this conveyor belt needs this belt changed because it's its time. Go check the oil on this doodad. I'm not an industrial engineer, so check the temperature of this thing over here. Look at these cogs. Look at these widgets. And they found the SAP thing was just terrible. Like it was like really, like it only worked on a PC, so you'd have to like run to the PC and then run back to the factory. Run to the PC, run back to the factory. And tablets were kind of are kind of a thing. And so he did a consulting gig to build software that replaced that SAP module. And then he kind of went and pitched someone else, and they're like, yeah, we'd use that, but we need this piece. And then by like the fourth consulting engagement, he had a product that people had paid him to develop. And then he just started going out to everyone that had SAP saying, I bet you have these 5 problems with that stupid module. They're like, yeah, it sucks. And he's like, give me $200K. You paid $2 million for that. Sorry. Give me $200K, and at least I'll give you a module that works. So that's kind of how they use consulting to kind of get customers to pay for it. Yeah, so that's another way to do this is if there's enough demand out there, there should be some customers that would pay for you to go build it for them. Now you have to make sure you get the intellectual property kind of piece of that right, that you own the derivative works and they get a license to it kind of thing. Because if you go consult and they just kind of say, thanks, now we own all that IP, now you don't have a product to sell. So that's the tricky, sticky part of that. But even Richard Holcomb, that's how they came up with this first company called Q+E Software. This goes back to, Dave may know, was like late 80s maybe, like 88, 89. They did database consulting, and there's this standard called ODBC, which we all know now. It was new, and every one of his consulting clients wanted him to build like a little connector into something else. So ODBC connected to all the databases, but it didn't connect to like Excel and 10 other things. So they built that, and they eventually kind of productized it. So there's been a lot of successes here in the triangle of people bootstrapping that way, which is good. Now, if you're not in software, I would consider software. I know one thing, and I know it well. So if you're not in software, there's probably cool 3D prototypes you can build or something. I don't know. Good.
So what's the biggest lesson you've learned from scaling multiple companies?
Yeah, scaling is really interesting. So I never went over 100 people until Channel Advisor. And to give you some perspective, we have 700 people globally, and about 450 here. And what's tricky is your role changes as CEO. So 0 to 50, you're like a team lead. You're part of the team. You're working, and then you're kind of spending maybe 10% of your time on the leadership piece. And then somewhere like around 50 to 100, that kind of changes. You can't do that anymore. You can't really be an efficient team member and a manager. So you kind of become a playing coach, or a coach that kind of has been a player before, or something like that, as a metaphor. So you kind of know what it's like to be in the trenches, and you can go talk about it, but you're not really actively coding or on every sales call, whatever that is. And then somewhere around 200 people, you have to just kind of get rid of that piece, and then you become coach, and you spend a lot of time recruiting, building your team, and then kind of making sure that everyone in the company is on the same page and that kind of stuff. So it's really weird every time you get to these things. It's very different. And right now I'm very bookend. So Spiffy is like 10 people. So there's like absolutely no process or anything like that. It's like totally crazy. And then at Channel Advisor, if I write a blog post, there's like 6 levels of approvals it has to go through. So sometimes I'll come from Channel, I'll go to Spiffy, and I'll just like run an email campaign because that feels good. I'm like, send, yeah.
Spiffy, how do you avoid the race to the bottom?
The bottom being pricing, or yeah.
Pricing, quality, yeah.
Yeah. So service is hard. That's not my forte. So there's people in the company that take care of that. And it's really tricky. You know, what we're trying to do is build a brand that's about convenience, professionalism, and that kind of thing. And you know, people are going to have to pay for that. So we're not going to be the cheapest out there. And so it's a premium brand. It's not going to be the cheapest one out there. And that's how we keep the, you know, on the what we charge side of the equation, the value side of the equation. But it's really good value. You know, if you think of what time it would take you to do what we do, it would take you twice as long. And if your time is worth anything at all, then it would be crazy to do it yourself. Then on the service side, you just really have to, you know, constantly train and retrain and train the service people to have a customer service element. And it's really tricky to find folks like that. One thing we found is we've gone through several failure cycles on this. You'd think hiring detailers would be a good idea, but it's actually bad because they have their own process that's way different than ours and kind of wacky. They don't do things kind of the spiffy way. So we do better hiring people that are kind of young, hungry. We pay $13 to $15 an hour. So these are folks with typical high school degrees that they didn't go to college. But, you know, they're looking at landscaping and some of those kinds of things, and we pay more than that. And it is a skill they can reuse. So, those are the folks that work really well for us.
Do you believe that art scales?
Art. Like
I
painting?
mean, well, I'm in video production.
Video production, yeah.
Do you believe that that has the opportunity to scale?
Yeah, it could, you know, at some point, you know, someone came up with Photoshop and all these tools and those kinds of things.
But that's like GitHub as the developer tool
Yeah.
for developers. There's Photoshop.
Those kind of creative, kind of, you know, hourly kind of things are hard to scale. Now there's you can kind of work yourself into that. You can always work yourself up the pay ladder, which is good. You know, I know iOS developers that make $300 an hour. They're just like ninjas for that stuff. And when some company needs someone that can like do, you know, something with the camera in a certain way, they call that guy and he makes his $300 an hour kind of thing. It is really hard to scale those kinds of businesses. And I don't have a lot of case studies of people doing it other than stumbling upon a product. The math is just always 1 to 1, or 1 to 2, 1 to 10, 1 to 20. You know, I'm always looking for kind of 1 to N kind of things that can scale kind of higher. Good.
Going back to the challenges of scaling and your experience scaling different businesses, how do you go about choosing your founding team and sort of, I guess, upgrading or changing your leadership team as you go through those stages?
Yeah, it's tough. You know, founding team is almost like a spouse, really. It's kind of your work spouse. You're going to be spending probably more time with these people than your actual significant other. So you have to trust them. You have to know when the chips are down, they're going to be in the foxhole with you because that stuff will happen. There's a couple of really interesting movies about startups, and like when you watch Silicon Valley, one of my favorite TV shows is Silicon Valley. It's hilarious. It's like really captures this whole thing. You know, there's another really good one, and this is probably from like the 2000 time frame, was called Startup.com. And you watch these things, and like the founders are arguing over ownership. You know, it's kind of like they spend 80% of their time. Now, some of that's dramatized, but I do find that a lot with these founding teams that, you know, they're so worried that someone's going to get a one up on them. So, you know, that they spend all their time and they end up owning, you know, 2% more of zero, which is still zero. So you know, a lot of that kind of stuff is really important to make sure you pick in folks that you know the economics, you're not going to argue about it, it kind of is what it is. You put egos aside and really just kind of focus on growing the business. So that's the one pitfall I see a lot of people fall into. They go and they get a partner, and then, you know, that guy is kind of crazy, and now he wants, you know, he wanted 10%, now he wants 80% of the company. What am I getting? You know, that kind of stuff falls apart kind of quickly. I don't have a great way to kind of like get to know a founder before, you know, it's just like interviewing. It's very hard to interview someone in a, you know, be it 1 hour to 8 hour kind of period and kind of know how they're going to act. So, you know, I've been fortunate to, so all three of my businesses have been founded with a guy named Aris, and I found him at NC State. I'm a bit of a night owl, so I would go to the computer lab, go do my school stuff, sleep from like 4 to 8, and then at 8 I would go back to the computer lab and work until like literally 3 or 4 a.m. And I would always see this dude over there with me, and finally I was like, who are you? And got to know him really well. And I was like, if I ever start a business, I want to do it. You know, this guy has my same kind of work ethic, and ultimately that's worked out really well. So, you know, another thing is to look for people that have different skill set than you. You know, a lot of times I find these people that, you know, there's these 3 MBAs and they went to Duke together and they're going to be the founding team, and that, you know, maybe that works. I'm sure there's cases that working, but that's going to be hard too, right? Because who's gonna be the technical person if it's a technology company? And I get a lot of that too, where there's these 3 guys, they have an idea and they're like, where do we go for a CTO kind of thing? Or they just outsource everything and they don't have a CTO, and then they're wondering what went wrong when it all goes sideways. So you know, having, you know, if they had like a business person, a technology person, and a salesperson or something like that, that's a pretty good founding combo. And those are different skill sets that you know, not every person has, if that makes sense. A great place to meet these folks is at CED events. A lot of the kind of founding teams kind of get together at a lot of these events like this and CED and stuff like that. Topic.
Yeah, Scott, if someone in here was looking for a mentor, what would you say are some of the, how do you approach someone you'd like to ask to be a mentor? What should some of the rules of engagement be?
Yeah, so approaching them is pretty easy. You know, they're all pretty out there and talk at events like this. You know, I would make sure it makes sense. Like, I get people that want me to mentor them about, you know, their cannabis thing. And I'm like, that's just, you know, I'm a software guy. I have no idea about the cannabis market. Good luck. Or, you know, or some hardware thing or something like that. So picking someone that kind of like, you know, is in your vertical and kind of, you know, understands what it is you're doing is probably number one. Number two, you know, you can use, another thing is using a trusted kind of intermediary, like the local VCs, the accountings, the lawyers. They're always really good at kind of matchmaking in this area and kind of helping you figure out who a mentor is. So if you have an accounting firm already or a lawyer, you could ask them, and they tend to have a pretty good Rolodex of these kind of folks. Dave Jones down there from Bull City Ventures, he would be good. And you know, there's also this Blackstone thing that seems to be like a programmatic. I don't know what the status of that is. It seems to kind of like sometimes be up and sometimes down. The Blackstone Entrepreneur Network. They have a ton of, it's like almost every mentor in the triangle in one little room there, so that's pretty cool. So you can actually go pitch those guys, and they'll kind of pull you in to be mentored or not. The universities, so all the universities have entrepreneurial kind of clusters. So if you went to ask Dr. Miller at NC State, he would know, you know, a bunch of the folks there. And if you went to ask Howie, what's Howie's long last name? I just call him Howie. Howie Reed at Duke, and then Randy. There's lots of people at UNC. I can't keep them all straight. There's like 3 or 4 UNC folks there. That's another good kind of intersection area. So you would say, hey, I need a mentor that knows all about solar farms, and they'll be like, oh, there's these 6 people that do that kind of thing.
Groundwork Labs is good for that too.
The CED VMS program.
CD has a program. Yep.
So outside of the help with your transactions, what other benefit did you get from advice from mentors during your career?
Tons of stuff. You know, all this scaling stuff is hard. You know, so you know, I'm used to, before Channel Advisor, I was used to having like this tight knit team. We all did everything together. It was great. And then, you know, Channel Advisor, we're at like 150 people, and everyone's like, what's our inclement weather policy? You know, can I get 6 weeks of vacation? You know, I don't like Sally. I refuse to sit near her. She breathes funny. You know, you're just like, some mentors can help you kind of like talk through. Being CEO is a very lonely kind of a thing, because you can do this, but it's not. So you can go like complain to like one of the people that reports to you, but that's like, you know, it's kind of weird, right? So it's very lonely. You're up there alone. You can't really go complain to your investors, because you want to have a, you know, somewhat happy kind of conversations with investors. Not, you know, like, oh, I got this employee Sally and she won't sit, you know, no one sits next to Sally because she breathes funny. What do I do? Investor will consider that a waste of their time, and that'll be right. So having a mentor gives you someone to go and, you know, you don't just go meet with them to talk about the Sally problem. not to pick on Sally, it could be Sam, so whoever they are. You don't go talk to them about, but you kind of like package it all together and like at maybe a monthly lunch or coffee, kind of like, all right, you know, and I would like literally have a list of 50 things and be like, okay, everyone wants to know the inclement weather policy. What should I do? Should I do one? Does it like change our culture? It just gives you someone to bounce those kind of ideas off of.
And were these people you met through the course of your working life, or did you meet them randomly at CED and build up a chemistry?
I forget how I met Richard Holcomb. There's probably a funny story there. I actually don't remember how I met him. It was probably at a CED event or something. Yeah, so he was like my good luck charm for a long time. He was on the board of for actually channel advisors for all three companies. Chris Evans was another. So there's this generation of NC State dudes, and I probably connected to him through Dr. Miller. That's probably how. So Chris Evans, Bill Nussey, you know, all these NC State guys that had been done software that I could kind of call on when I had these problems. So for me, it was the connection to the university that helped a lot, I think, on that.
Thank you.
And you know, CED, there's so much more of it now. So if you're at American Underground, they have these help sessions. You can meet people. You know, all the incubator kind of workspace options have people just come in and give you advice, which you know, we didn't really have back in the day. CED has been kind of the continuity through all that.
One more question?
Good.
Thanks for sharing your story. I have a question about the sequence of like finding customer first and then going through the product or idea. How would you go about finding the actual customer?
Yeah. So you know I've never been the person to come up with like Facebook to like draw on the glass of my dorm and be like, oh, you know, that kind of moment. So I kind of have to understand a customer's pain, and to do that, I just like talk to a lot of them. So, and then you need to do it in an area you know something about. So at Stingray, for example, I knew about Visual C++, so it was easy for me to go to developer conferences and chat with developers about, yeah, you're using Visual C++, what do you like about it, what don't you like, oh, why don't you like that, well, it'd be cool if we did this, but what would that, let's say I did that, what would it look like? You know, so just having these kind of conversations where you're trying to pick away at what is their pain and how do I solve it, and can I solve it in such a way that it's like so awesome they'll pay for it, and you know, and it delivers like, you know, some multiple of what they're paying, some ROI. So if they pay me $1,000, did it deliver $5,000 worth of benefit, or $10,000? The higher that is, the better kind of an idea you kind of have, right? So aside from that, I don't have any advice other than, you know, be passionate about something, get to really know it, and then, you know, this is an idea you know, like Channel Advisor I've been working on for 15 years. If I didn't love e-commerce, I'd be like bored out of my mind. So that, you know, the fact that we decided to do something in e-commerce was because I was just really fascinated by it and interested in it. So definitely have that as an input. You know, don't just kind of go do something that you don't find intriguing and really exciting to you as an entrepreneur. That you can kind of, even if you don't know all about it, you know, how can you go be an expert on that and then go have those discussions and be able to kind of, you know, talk through it. So I know that's kind of generic and it sounds easy, but without knowing details, it's hard to kind of, you know, tell you how to do that.
You got a question in the corner real quick over there.
This is really the last question, right?
Right.
So, Scott, potential customers, I think, have a lot of distractions, and there's also a lot of competition, right?
Yep.
Can you give some examples of standing out and building customer bases?
Yeah, so you have to build a brand. So one page of my playbook is becoming an expert in an area. So I stumbled upon this at my first business. You know, I didn't have any income for a period of time. And I'm like, how am I going to survive? And I actually pitched these guys on writing a book about MFC, about this Visual C++. And they're like, sure, we'd love to, and we'll pay you, you know, $20K to go write this book. And I was like, this is awesome. I'm getting paid to write a book that makes me, seem like an expert in this area, and kind of, it's self-promote, but not like in an overt way, but just kind of like by association that, oh, this guy wrote this book, his company must know what it's doing, kind of a thing. So since then, that's been like page one of my playbook is, all right, I'm going to know everything about e-commerce and put a lot of content out there and become kind of an expert at it. So that helps build that brand and reinforce it. I've always done better. Another part of that playbook is creating a premium brand that kind of says we're not going to be the cheapest out there. To your point about race to the bottom, it's very as a first-time entrepreneur, it's very easy to say, I'm going to sell this by having the cheapest product. That's the path to zero, which is really tough. It's better to say, I'm going to have the best product people pay a premium for, and that gets their attention. People like Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and Cadillacs for a reason more than Yugos or Hyundais or something, and that's because there's a premium halo effect that you get when you build a brand like that. Another trick is just outwork the heck out of everyone else. So just outwork your competitors. And I've been to JCPenney 30 times. Our competitors probably went twice, even though none of us has sold them. I'm working harder than they are. I'm lapping them. In the early days, another thing you can do if you don't go the consulting route is get that first referenceable customers, like this huge step function for a software company. So going in and saying, hey, I understand your pain. We're going to build software. Could you be a beta customer? No cost to you for a period of time. All we ask is A, you don't tell anyone you got it for free, and then B, if you could give us a quote or a case study or something like that. So in the early days of stuff, to get the gears going, you have to kind of give away something. And you have to make it clear that you're giving away something that has value. Normally we're going to charge $10K for this, and we're going to give it to you free for 3 years because we want to have you as a first. We want to really partner with you to build this up and that kind of thing. So that's a way to kind of get from, all right, I've got an idea, I build a prototype. How do I get that first customer? Did that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay. Real quickly, hold on one second. I want to thank our sponsors, Google for Entrepreneurs, Intuit, Lone Rider Beer, Big Al. So Big Al said to me before he left, if you guys go to his place, mention Startup Grind, you get 10% off your meal. And Lindsay C&D, big help to us. Other than that, give Scott a big round of applause for coming out.